Good afternoon, Dave.
Good afternoon, Ken. How you doing?
I'm doing well. This is Kent Comfort here with Dave Kingsley. And Dave, we've had three sessions addressing concerns about the impact of the evangelicals and their organizations and efforts to drive and guide and control uh, public policy. So today, here's a thought I would like your help with. Um, Frank Luntz, we have to thank for the task and the strategy of framing language in a way that stirs certain kinds of emotional reactions and drives people in a direction that you intend to drive and control. And so semantics matter, we've learned over the years. They matter a lot. I'm going to apply that to the term Christian radical or evangelical radical and suggest that should the reference be theocratic radical, because we see when we look up the definition of theocratic that it refers to an intent by religious authorities to take over and control and manage government policy. What are your thoughts about that? Is that something that's important to articulate?
I do, Ken. I think we have to begin to look at not just a theology or a doctrine that's being practiced, but when that doctrine becomes injected into public policy, it becomes a government thing. So it becomes theocratic, which implies government, a form of government that is influenced by or even dominated by a religious organization or a network of religious organizations based on their beliefs. And I don't think we fully have taken a look at that and how far that's progressed.
Important point. Very important point. So go a little bit further with that, how that is infiltrating or penetrating Americans' lives in ways they may not be conscious of.
Well, I think in the past few videos, we've talked about how the state's math standards have changed. We've talked about how public or private schools, charter schools based on religion get money and so forth. In other words, we're seeing more and more of that breakdown between church and state. But on a larger scale, we're looking at the state legislature of Kansas, which is pretty much dominated by a conservative majority that has a very clear theocratic bent. In other words, they do legislate based on religious beliefs. For instance, women's reproductive rights. For instance, gay rights. This group also has some nexus, some connection with a very conservative business community. They have an alliance. So part of their doctrine is free market, hyper-capitalism's fine, and they've woven that into their theology in some manner or other.
Sure. Okay. And many of the people who believe they're supportive of that don't even realize the ways that they're being impacted personally in an unfavorable manner, do they?
No, I think people read the newspapers and they see a certain act taken by the Kansas legislature, and it's conservative. That's how it's going to be reported in the newspaper through the media. So they're filtering out the theocratic part. They're filtering out how these folks have been motivated by their religious beliefs.
Sure. Yes. Now, another aspect of this is an interesting seeming partnership between money influence sources such as the Koch organizations that they support and this theocratic radical group. They don't necessarily share a doctrine or philosophy, but they seem to maybe feed off of each other, don't they, in terms of how they can work together to get what they each think they want. And those things they want aren't necessarily the same thing.
Absolutely. I think if we look at this latest Supreme Court nomination, we have here a person who came from a very conservative Catholic background and she came out of Notre Dame Law School, groomed by a group of very right-wing Catholic professors who got her on the Supreme Court. That six-person majority now has a network of money, a network of organizations behind it. So what we have is we can connect all of those six Roberts, what we will call the Robert Six, the majority, supermajority on the Supreme Court, back to the Federalist Society, which can be connected back to a very right-wing Catholic group. So we have 6 of 9 justices now that are Catholics. That's okay. I don't have a problem with people being Catholic and being on the Supreme Court. It's just that this is a very conservative, in fact, an extremist right-wing Catholic viewpoint that influences legislation or influences decision-making on the court.
So do I remember hearing correctly that at this point of 9 justices, 7 are practicing Catholics?
I think it's 6. I mean, I'm not sure about that, but that's pretty amazing.
Well, that shouldn't matter.
No.
But it's something that people are still going to think about and focus on, right or wrong.
Yes, and I think these extreme doctrinaire Catholics are very much in sync with the extreme evangelical Protestants. So they really work very well together. It's just that there happens to be a very well-funded, potent, strong Catholic movement like Opus Dei or other organizations that are pushing a Catholic viewpoint into government.
Mm-hmm. So another thought that comes to mind, Dave, is that are we headed to a system or a process where instead of co-equal branches of power, the executive branch, the legislative branch, and the judicial branch, we have a formulation of the judicial branch sort of at the top of a pyramid in a position to be the final arbiters that can be exploited, even if there is a Democratic majority in the legislature and in the White House. The minority Republican group could force things into a Supreme Court environment in order to capture their will, express their will. And now we don't have co-equal branches of government anymore. We have a very different system.
We have a very different system. And the idea that the judicial system doesn't make law is a silly fiction now, because they will make law. And now we also have the appeals courts have been loaded up with Trump appointees, with very conservative right-wing appointees. So they're going to get these cases up to the court, up to this. There are even people on the far right who are appealing cases, asking the appeals court to rule against them, so they can get it up to the Supreme Court faster. And we know that the Supreme Court conservatives have a way to send signals out that they want to see a case on a particular subject. The Janus case, which had to do with labor unions, was exactly that. Alito had given signals in several of his decisions that he wanted that case to come up to the Supreme Court. So, and Alito was a very doctrinaire right-wing jurist.
Mm-hmm. Yes. And that's something that our media sources do not seem to do a very good job of carving out and educating us about. So this signaling, as you speak of, that's a good statement. That's a good perspective. Can go on forever without a lot of people even realizing that's what's going on. Well, Dave, this is a lot to ponder and study. You've certainly stimulated a lot of thought and concern that I feel like I need to become much more aware of in my efforts to read and research, and hopefully our viewers will be stimulated to do the same thing going forward.
You're right, Ken. I think we have to begin to get this out there and get the media, put pressure on the media, begin to pick up on this.
Exactly.
So I think we've got a lot to talk about.
Well, as always, thanks so much for your time and your thoughts. They're very helpful, and I'm looking forward to our next one.
Thank you, Kent.